If you ever think about like, oh, how do I create like crosshatch? How do I create like, what's it called? Halftone patterns, like the dots that get smaller and smaller to like show shading. And this is how you can do it, okay? Here we have the gradient going from 0 to 1, blah, blah, blah. We all know what this is now. Now, let's look at any other blend mode than the basic mix node or multiply node that we've covered so far. The one that I want to talk about right now is color burn. Here's the formula if you want to see it. I don't know if that helps anyone, but let me just show you what it does, and then hopefully you can see kind of what happens, okay? So if we, for example, take the distance here from this Voronoi texture, which looks like this, right? So what you would expect to happen, right, with this gradient is if we here on white, actually, you know what? I'm just going to type. I don't know why I'm trying to explain things, okay? Here, look at this. This is what happens, okay? I think I'm just like trying to understand it better myself while I'm explaining it, but I don't think there's any hope in that, so let's just get into the visuals. This is what it does to a gradient when you apply the Voronoi color burn onto this gradient. This is what happens. So this is also what it would do to lighting. Let's see another example, which would be this one, for example. Let's plug in the factor here into B, and then you can see what it does for this. And this is what the noise texture looks like. So you can kind of see it creates a gradient, but that gradient can have the pattern of the texture that you plug into it. Here for this noise, it's kind of sharp, but you can see for the Voronoi, for example, how like cool it can look. And then if we change the randomness, for example, it can look like something more organic. And in the original, it looks like this. So this is where the color burn node is really, really useful for anime shading. Because then if we wanted to, for example, we can use a greater than node, plug that in here, and then we have a very clean edge like this. If you were to put this in here, the noise texture, for example, we have a transition like this. And we can adjust it, of course, to create a slightly different gradient. And this is how you can turn normal lighting gradients into cool effects like halftone, for example, which if we now move over to the actual lit sphere, you can see it's lit by this light right here. I've already applied it to the noise texture here. So now if we change this, we can change the secret factor. It's kind of like how much like gray gets burned by the second texture, I guess. So if you put the distance down here, you can see, look at that. And that's how you can stylize the gradient of the light for your 3D models, or for your scene, I guess you could call it. Some oftentimes, like something you can see where this has been used, for example, is for the Spider-Verse movies. For highlights, for example, they oftentimes use a sort of like half-tone gradient for highlights. So you could use it for that, for example, or if you want to make like a manga panel with 3D objects, you can use a shade like this, for example, as well. So you can experiment with like how the color burn helps you create different effects. Of course, if you want to do it the opposite way, you would have to go in here and invert the Voronoi, which you could do if you use, for example, another math node, and you can invert any value by just grabbing the distance or grabbing the value, putting it into the lower part of the subtract, set the subtract to 1. So 1 minus 1 is minus 1, 1 minus 0.5 is 0.5, and 1 minus 0 is 1. Wait, I'm confused. But basically what it does is it inverts the gradient from 0 to 1. And then we get this. Look at that. That looks pretty cool. And if we move this, you can see how it reacts. Okay. So this is how you can, for example, create cool effects on the gradient of the lighting. If you want to learn more about 3D anime, make sure to check out my free 3D anime course here on YouTube. In there, I basically try to condense all the information that I have gathered over the last 2.5 years of creating my projects and learning things and researching things and testing things, basically. And I've tried to put it all into this one course for free, which you can see and find on YouTube. So if you're curious about that and want to learn more and go more in depth in creating your own 3D anime, for example, make sure to check out the description where you'll find the link to it. Otherwise, I guess you can also just enjoy more of these clips if you want. So yeah, do whatever you want.